You dip your fingers into the golden honey, thick and glistening, and bring it to your lips. It is sweeter than anything you have ever tasted, warm like sunlight, rich like the earth's deepest secrets. You close your eyes, savouring it, not thinking, not asking. A sudden wind rushes through the room, though the air was still just moments before. The candles flicker, the taste on your tongue turns bitter, your throat tightens. You didn't ask, a voice hums, low and full of knowing. It's everywhere, around you, within you, in the marrow of your bones. You drop the honey jar. It doesn't shatter, but the weight of your mistake crashes over you. You kneel, and you press your trembling hands to the floor. The voice laughs, golden and cruel. Oshun does not forget. The laughter fades, but the weight of her presence lingers. Your tongue swells, the sweetness turning to fire in your mouth. Your hands clutch at your throat, desperate, but no relief comes. The honey seeps from the fallen jar, pooling at your knees, glistening like molten gold. The scent is intoxicating, overwhelming, punishment wrapped in temptation. You wished for sweetness without reverence. Oshun's voice lilts, softer now, but no less firm. Now you will crave what you cannot have. The fire in your throat vanishes, but the hunger remains, an endless, aching thirst for honey that will never again taste sweet. Hello and welcome back to Ladies of Lore, the podcast where we take all of the most wonderful women of mythology and folklore and we unpick, unravel and explore their origins, their stories and how they have evolved through time to arrive in today's modern world. I'm India and today is the final episode of February. Can you believe it? It went a lot quicker than January though, didn't it? Which is definitely a good thing because I truly feel that I lived 100 lives in January. I'm very grateful to have you back here with me this week, and if you're new to the podcast, welcome on in. If you enjoy the episode, please do subscribe wherever you're listening and feel free to leave me a little comment because it does make my day. And you can also follow me over on Blue Sky. The link will be in the show notes. I'm kind of chatty over there, so it'd be great to see you over there too. And it's also a great alternative to X if you are trying to move away from the whole metaverse, Musk-owned apps, which I know many of us are, myself included. Right, on to the good stuff. So today we embark on a journey through time and water. Yes, we are back in the water again today, guys, and I'm not even sorry about it because today we are diving into the story of Oshun, the Yoruba goddess of love, fertility, rivers, and divine femininity. Oshun is a living, breathing force in spiritual traditions and modern culture alike. From her origins in West Africa to her presence in the African diaspora, from ancient rituals to Beyoncé's lemonade. Yes, we are going to be talking about Beyoncé. Today we're going to uncover how Oshun has evolved while still retaining her essence. So pour yourself some honey tea, get comfortable, and let's set sail on the sacred river of Oshun. Oshun originates from the Yoruba religion, one of the most influential spiritual traditions of West Africa. The Yoruba people, primarily from what is now Nigeria, Benin and Togo, believe in a pantheon of 401 deities known as the Orishas, powerful divine beings who govern different aspects of the universe. According to Yoruba cosmology, at the beginning of creation, 17 Orishas were sent by Olodumare, the supreme god, to form the earth, with Oshun being the only female. However, the male Orishas initially dismissed Oshun, believing that they could create the world without her, and their arrogance was costly. Without Oshun's feminine energy, the world became barren, devoid of life, and it was only when they humbled themselves and sought Oshun's help that she brought with her fertility, beauty, and the flow of sweet waters that made the earth habitable. This myth solidifies her as the force of creation, a goddess whose presence is essential for balance and for life itself. Interestingly, there is actually another version of this story where it was actually the female spirits who wanted to create the world but failed without the leadership of men. But this version is most likely influenced by Abrahamic religions, as they had a patriarchal society, so likely wanted to subvert the narrative. And it also raises a really fascinating point that many African traditional religions often grant women far more significant spiritual, social, and political respect in comparison with Western patriarchal religious systems. Indigenous religions tend to have a far greater gender balance due to several cultural and spiritual principles. For instance, many African religions emphasise a balance between male and female divine forces, unlike Abrahamic religions that often place a singular male god at the top. African spirituality often sees gender as a dual force, embracing a duality instead of competing, and the importance of balance between genders is taught, giving equal reverence to female deities and spiritual figures. Some African societies, including Bantu groups and some Zulu clans, follow a matrilineal inheritance, where lineage and leadership actually passes down through the mother's line. And this gives women significantly more influence in politics, economics, and family structures. Ancestral worship is often central in spirituality across Africa, with the role of mothers and grandmothers as spiritual guides being crucial. Women are often priests, diviners, and healers. Remember the Igbo people I told you about last week, where women had their own clubs and societies, could marry each other, and led religious practices? And because religious practices were not kept separate from daily lives, women were able to exert power in other areas too, with women historically controlling trade and agriculture in many places. For instance, the Igbo women's market networks that we discussed last week. Ashanti women traders and Yoruba female entrepreneurs are also examples of this. And it was only with colonialism that more rigid patriarchal systems arrived in African societies, and many traditionalists still reject foreign-imposed patriarchal structures in favour of their ancestral gender roles. And that was a bit of a tangent about the patriarchy, but I thought it was particularly interesting given that we've been discussing black women in mythology for the last few weeks, and I don't know if you've noticed, but there wasn't this sense of demonising of the women that we've been talking about. If you think back to the episodes about Lilith, the Morrigan, and Jezebel, how were they perceived by their societies? And how does that compare to what I've just told you and what you've heard about Oshun, Mamiwata, and Allah? It's food for thought. And now you know a little bit about Oshun's origins, let me tell you what she looks like. Oshun is often depicted as a beautiful, enchanting woman dressed in flowing yellow or gold garments, symbolising her connection to prosperity, joy, and attraction. Her skin is often radiant, glowing like the sun, emphasising her warmth and her life-giving essence. She's associated with fresh waters, particularly rivers, which represent her nurturing and purifying power. Her symbols include rivers, mirrors, honey, peacock feathers, and fans. And the mirror is one of her most iconic items, reflecting her connection to beauty, self-love, and divination. Honey is sacred to her, representing the sweetness of life and love, and is often used in offerings to gain her favour. The peacock, with its dazzling, iridescent feathers, embodies her elegance, her pride, and connection to divine femininity. Fans, particularly those adorned with gold and peacock feathers again, signify her ability to soothe, attract, and command attention with grace. Circling back a sec to hone in on honey again, because honey is often closely associated with Oshun, and it's a symbol of sweetness and pleasure, and also of Oshun's seductive powers. However, legend warns that she is the only Orisha who can consume honey without consequences. If mortals try without her blessing, they may face misfortune, And despite Oshun being known as the goddess of love and fertility, she also has a dark side. When angered, she can become the fierce Oshun Ibu, embodying wrathful justice, wielding her rivers to drown those who disrespect her. This duality between benevolence and vengeance makes her one of the most complex Orishas in Yoruba mythology. In religious ceremonies and artistic representations, she's often adorned with gold jewellery, emphasising her connection to wealth and abundance. Her presence is felt in the shimmering waters of a river, in the laughter of a joyful heart, and in the delicate balance of seduction and wisdom. As a powerful Orisha, she is both nurturing and fierce, capable of granting love and prosperity, but also of punishing those who take her kindness for granted. Now, shall we talk about some stories of Oshun? The first interaction between Oshun and the people of Osogbo is one of the most deeply rooted tales in the sacred history of the town, and remains central to celebrate the annual Osun Osogbo festival. And this festival celebrates Oshun as the protector of the community, and during it, devotees offer her honey, oranges, cinnamon, and river water in gratitude and prayer. So what I'll do is I'll tell you the story behind this festival to begin with. According to legend, centuries ago, a group of Yoruba settlers migrated in search of a suitable place to establish a new settlement. They arrived in what is now Osogbo, a dense forest filled with towering trees and the presence of a mystical Osun river, which was believed to be the dwelling place of the deity Oshun. The settlers, unaware of Oshun's divine presence, began to clear the forest and build their homes near the riverbank. As they worked, they unknowingly disrupted the sacred domain of Oshun, angering the goddess. Soon, their actions led to mysterious occurrences. Tools went missing, eerie voices echoed through the trees, and their efforts to construct homes seemed to be thwarted by unseen forces. One day, while cutting wood, a tree fell into the river, causing a great disturbance in the water. This act enraged Oshun, who emerged from the river in her radiant form, confronting the settlers. Oshun warned them that they had encroached upon her sacred territory. The settlers, initially fearful, realised that they were in the presence of a powerful divine being. Seeking forgiveness, they humbly pleaded with Oshun, explaining that they meant no harm and they were only searching for a place to call home. Oshun, being both a goddess of love and fierce protector of her domain, saw the sincerity in their pleas, and rather than driving them away, she made a sacred pact with them. She agreed to bless their settlement with prosperity, fertility, and protection, but in return, they had to honour her and worship her, ensuring that her river and her sacred grove remained untouched and revered. With this divine agreement, Oshun embraced the people of Osogbo, and true to her word, the town flourished. The river provided an abundance of fish and clean water, the land became fertile for agriculture, and the community grew strong under her spiritual guidance. To this day, the divine covenant is honoured through the annual Osun Osogbo festival, a grand celebration where people from all over the world gather to pay homage to Oshun, seeking her blessing for prosperity, fertility, and protection. The sacred Osun Grove in Osogbo remains a UNESCO World Heritage Site, preserving the legacy of that first sacred encounter between the goddess and her people. And that was the story of the Osogbo people and Oshun, and the origin story of the Osun Osogbo festival. And now I'm going to read you a story all about Oshun and Olodumare. Full disclosure, I am reading this from blackhistoryheroes.com, which is a wonderful website full of some amazing educational material. There's book recommendations, there's recipes, and there's all sorts on there. So I'd thoroughly recommend that you check that out. As I say, I am reading this directly from a blog post on there, and it is not my own words. So if you do enjoy this story, please do go and give that website some love. It has been said in the sacred stories of our West African Yoruba tradition that Oshun is the only Orisha able to approach Olodumare directly, carrying prayers from the mouth of humanity to Olodumare's ears. This is the story of Oshun's flight and how she became the messenger of Olodumare. In the early days of the world and of the Ile Ife, the Orishas became tired of serving Olodumare, They began to resist the Lord of Heaven's edicts and to even plot to overthrow Olodomer's kingdom in heaven and earth. They felt they didn't need Olodomer, and that as Lord of Heaven, he was so distant anyway that they could merely divide the powers amongst themselves and that things would go much better that way. When Olodomer caught wind of this attitude and of their plots, the Lord of Heaven acted simply and decisively. Olodomer simply withheld the rain from the earth. Soon the world was encompassed by a staggering drought. The ground became parched and cracked, the plants withered and died without water, and it wasn't long before all on earth, Orishas and their children alike, began to starve. After a short time, growling bellies and sallow faces began to speak louder than pride and rebelliousness. They unanimously decided to go to Olodomer and beg for forgiveness, in hopes that this would bring rain back to the world. But they had a problem. None of them could reach the distant home of Olodomer. They sent all the birds, one by one, to attempt the journey, but each and every one of them failed, tiring long before they reached the palace of the Lord of Heaven. And it began to appear that all hope was lost. Then, one day, the peacock, who was in reality Oshun herself, came to offer her services to save the world from this drought. Once again, there was general upheaval and even more laughter, as the Orishas considered the idea of this vain and pampered bird undertaking such a courageous and dangerous journey. "You might break a nail," said one. But the little peacock persisted. As they had nothing to lose, they agreed to let Oshun go on the world's behalf. So the peacock flew off towards the sun and the palace of Olodomer. Oshun soon tired of the journey, but she kept flying even higher, determined to reach the Lord of Heaven and to directly plea for the world. Going yet higher, Oshun's feathers began to become scraggly and black from the withering heat of the sun, and all the feathers were burned from her head. But she kept flying. Finally, through sheer will and determination, she arrived at the gates of Olodomer's palace. When Olodomer came out, she was pathetic to look at. Oshun had lost much of her feathers, and the ones that remained were black. In all truth, Oshun was looking quite scraggly. To get to heaven, she had to fly so close to the sun and sacrifice her beautiful feathers. The Lord of Heaven took pity on Oshun and brought her to the palace where she was fed and given water, and her wounds were treated. He asked Oshun why she had made such a perilous journey, and she explained the state of the earth and went on to tell Olodomer that she had come at risk of her own life so that humanity might live. Olodomer looked to the world. He then looked at Oshun's plaintive face. It was obvious that everything she said was true, and he was moved by Oshun's capacity to love. The Lord of Heaven turned to the peacock, who wasn't a peacock anymore. The flight for humanity turned Oshun's outer form into that of a vulture. He ordered the rains to fall from heaven, and then Olodomer looked deeply into Oshun's eyes and into her heart, and then announced that for all eternity she would be the messenger of the house of Olodomer, and that all would have to respect her as such. From that day forward, in this path, Oshun became known as Ikole, the messenger of the house of Olodomer. And from that day, the path of Oshun, known as Ibu Ikole, was revered and became associated with her bird, the vulture. The vulture then returned to earth, bringing with her the rain, where she was met with great rejoicing. As benefits a queen, or Iyalode, Oshun graciously refrained from reminding them of their jibes and abuses, as she could see the shame on their faces. And this is why, whenever a person is to become initiated as a priest in the Yoruban religion, no matter which Orisha they are having seated in their heads, they must first go to the river and give an account of what they are to do, as Oshun is the messenger of Olodomer. So there are two stories about Oshun. And I also found a very similar version of the second story I told you about, but from a Santarian perspective. And I won't read this one to you because it is pretty similar, but I will include a link if you want to have a little look and see if you can spot any differences between the two tales. And now you've heard some stories, let's have a look at how Oshun has changed over time. Much like the other black women of mythology that we've spoken about before on the podcast, the transatlantic slave trade had a huge impact on Yoruba religious traditions and, by extension, the worship of Oshun. As Yoruba spiritual traditions were carried across the Atlantic through the transatlantic slave trade, enslaved Africans preserved their beliefs by merging them with Catholic saints and local spiritual practices. And this led to different versions of Oshun in Cuba, Brazil, Haiti, New Orleans, and beyond, each tradition retaining her essential qualities of beauty, sensuality, healing, and the power of water, while adding new dimensions based on the cultural and religious landscapes. In Cuban Santeria, a syncretic religion blending Yoruba traditions with Roman Catholicism, Oshun is known as Ochan. She is associated with Our Lady of Charity, the patron saint of Cuba, depicted wearing a golden robe with a child in her arms. This connection reflects Oshun's nurturing and protective qualities, as well as her ability to bring good fortune. Santeria practitioners, known as santeros, honour her with offerings of honey, sunflowers, oranges, and cinnamon, usually placed near rivers or altars and decorated in yellow and gold. Her energy is invoked for love spells, fertility blessings, and prosperity rituals. Unlike her strictly Yoruba version, the Cuban version of Oshun has a stronger connection to Catholic iconography and is often invoked in prayers alongside saints. In Brazilian candomblé, Oshun becomes Oxum, one of the most revered Orishas. She is associated with Our Lady of Conception, reflecting her connection to purity, motherhood, and fertility again. Devotees describe her as both gentle and cunning, capable of bringing love and wealth, but also inflicting vengeance on those who betray her. And she is honoured in Bahia, where practitioners perform ceremonial dances and offerings at waterfalls and rivers. She's depicted as a regal, golden-clad queen who enjoys luxury, perfumes and fine clothes. However, in candomblé, she also has a more maternal and protective aspect, often depicted carrying a baby, symbolising her role as the nurturer of children and pregnant women. Unlike the Cuban and Yoruba versions, the Brazilian is more deeply linked to water as a spiritual force. For instance, her presence is not just in rivers, but it is also in the amniotic fluid that surrounds babies in the womb. This association with childbirth makes her one of the most sought-after orishas for women seeking fertility and safe pregnancies. And then we have Haitian voodoo. And here, Oshun transforms into someone you might very well recognise if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, Azuli Freda, the spirit of love, beauty and material wealth. Freda embodies luxury, romance and feminine power, and often depicted as a light-skinned woman wearing elegant clothes adorned in gold jewellery and carrying a handkerchief to wipe away her constant tears. Unlike Oshun, who is often joyful and playful, Azuli Freda is known for her melancholy and her longing, symbolising unfulfilled love. She is associated with Mater Dolorosa, Our Lady of Sorrow in Catholicism, reflecting her emotional depth and capacity for suffering. Devotees offer her champagne, fine perfumes, pink roses and sweet dessert to appease her and to ask her for her blessings in love and financial success. However, Azuli Freda also has a tragic side. She is known to weep over the imperfections of the world, longing for a love that never truly lasts. This makes her one of the most emotionally complex spirits in voodoo, representing both the joys and sorrows of romance. In some voodoo and Afro-Caribbean traditions, Oshun also merges with another familiar face to the podcast, La Sirène, the mermaid-like water spirit associated with the sea, wealth and deep feminine mysteries. Unlike Oshun's river associations, La Sirène is connected to the vast, mysterious ocean, ruling over dreams, music and spiritual insight. And she too is often depicted holding a mirror, just like Oshun, reflecting this theme of self-awareness and vanity. While La Sirène shares Oshun's seductive nature, she's also more mystical and elusive, appearing in dreams and visions to those she favours. And many believe she calls to devotees through music and the sound of the waves. In New Orleans, voodoo and hoodoo, Oshun is recognised as a powerful spirit of love, magic, beauty, and prosperity. While she does not have a direct Catholic counterpart in New Orleans traditions, she is often associated with various saints depending on the practitioner's background. Unlike her Cuban and Brazilian forms, New Orleans Oshun is more tied to magic and conjuring traditions, blending with local folk practices and charms to manifest desires. And if you'd like to learn more about the Erzulie and Haitian voodoo, you can check out the Ladies of Law episode that covers the Erzulie in a little bit more detail. But isn't it just so fascinating to think that there are so many crossovers here, even with Mami Wata from just a few weeks back? It's really clear to see that Oshun's influence spread far and wide with the impact of the transatlantic slave trade, and this led to the blending of Oshun with other religious practices and societal values, with each taking Oshun and adding new meaning to her mythology. And it didn't ever really stop. Oshun is still very much venerated today, and you yourself have most likely seen reference to her plenty of times. So let's take a look at where Oshun can be found today and have a little chat about the Beyoncé of it all. Oshun has experienced a resurgence in mainstream media, particularly through music, film and spirituality, with one of the most notable examples being the Queen Bee herself, Cowboy Carter, Beyoncé Giselle Knowles. I think her middle name's Giselle. There's probably another middle name that I'm missing. I might have got it wrong. Do you know what? We'll just roll with it. Beyoncé Giselle Knowles Carter, Cowboy Carter. It's her. But I promise you there is a point to me talking about Beyoncé here, because Beyoncé has frequently been associated with Oshun, particularly in her visual and musical artistry. And one of the most striking and widely recognised instances of Beyoncé embodying Oshun came in the visual album Lemonade of 2016. In the opening scenes of the song Hold Up, Beyoncé appears in a flowing golden dress, stepping out of a doorway surrounded by water. And this imagery is a direct allusion to Oshun, who, as you now know, is often represented in gold and associated with rivers and water. As Beyoncé moves through the scene, joyfully swinging a baseball bat and destroying things with the biggest smile, she exhibits both the sweetness and wrath of Oshun, who you also know is renowned for her capacity to love deeply, but also to unleash fury when she's wronged. And if you've not seen this music video, where have you been? If not, go and watch it right now, actually, because your head is going to be full of all of these fun facts about Oshun and it's going to hit just perfectly. Anyway, this visual reference aligns with the thematic content of Lemonade, which is an album that explores themes of betrayal, pain, self-empowerment and renewal. In Yoruba tradition, Oshun is both nurturing, as we know, and vengeful, capable of great love, but also of fierce retribution. Beyoncé's portrayal mirrors this duality as she transitions from sorrow to empowerment throughout the album, embodying the strength and resilience of divine feminine energy. Beyond Lemonade, Beyoncé has continued to incorporate Oshun-like imagery in her performances and public appearances. In her pregnancy announcement of 2017, she posed in a manner reminiscent of traditional depictions of divine motherhood, wearing a veil and cradling her stomach, evoking associations with both the Virgin Mary and Oshun as a mother goddess. This connection was further emphasised in her 2017 Grammy performance, where she appeared in golden regalia with an elaborate headpiece, resembling depictions of divine feminine figures across various cultures, including Oshun. And I'll pop some links to photos of this in the show notes so you can check it out. In Black is King of 2020, Beyoncé further explored African spirituality, particularly in relation to Yoruba deities, including Oshun. Throughout the visual album, she continues to wear golden hues, embracing water symbolism and reinforce the themes of fertility, lineage and feminine power. The project as a whole serves as a celebration of African spirituality and identity, emphasising a reclamation of ancestral power. And probably the most direct references are in the song Black Parade, where she quite literally says, "My Oshun energy." And there's also the song Mood Forever, where she says, "Oshun, Queen of Sheba, I am the mother." But the connection between Beyoncé and Oshun is not merely aesthetic, it carries deep cultural and spiritual significance. In the African diaspora, Oshun represents the divine feminine and the power of self-love, healing and rebirth. By channeling her essence, Beyoncé not only pays homage to Yoruba traditions, but also offers a powerful message to black women about reclaiming their heritage, embracing their sensuality, and asserting their strength. And this alignment with Oshun has influenced the way Beyoncé is perceived in popular culture. Fans and scholars alike have noted how her artistic choices elevate the visibility of African spiritual traditions, encouraging a broader appreciation for the depth and complexity of Yoruba mythology. In this way, her connection to Oshun extends far beyond personal artistic expression and to a larger cultural and spiritual movement that reclaims and celebrates African heritage. And there's a lesson about Beyoncé mythology tie-in that you never knew you needed, but you got anyway, so you're welcome. Outside of the Beehive, Oshun has influenced other artists such as Janelle Monáe, who often incorporates Orisha symbolism into her work. Monáe is known for her Afro-futurist vision and deep engagement with black history and spirituality, and she's drawn inspiration from Oshun in several ways, including frequently incorporating gold and yellow tones into her outfits and her performances, and also in her album visuals, and these colours are all traditionally associated, as you know, with Oshun. Her overall aesthetic often blends elements of African spirituality and science fiction, similar to how Oshun embodies both divine mysticism and earthly sensuality. Like Oshun, who is known for her sensual and nurturing aspects, Monáe has openly embraced themes of sexual freedom, fluidity, and empowerment. Her music and public persona celebrate black womanhood, black pleasure, and self-love, which are all central to Oshun's mythology. Monáe has spoken many times about honouring ancestral traditions and embracing African spirituality in her creative processes. And this can be seen in the song Django Jane, during which Monáe delivers a powerful rap celebrating black womanhood, self-sovereignty and resilience, all qualities associated with Oshun. And I will read you some of the lyrics. I'm not going to try and rap them for you though, because that would be embarrassing. But some of the most poignant lines include things like, "We gave you life, we gave you birth. We gave you God, we gave you earth." And these lines, they echo the idea of divine feminine energy and creation and nurturing power, which Oshun embodies. And it wouldn't be Ladies of Lore if we didn't mention a bit of literature, where Oshun's influence is found in works such as Daughters of the Stone by Dama Llanos Figueroa, which explores African spiritual traditions in Caribbean narratives. And then there's the book-to-TV show American Gods, and that features Oshun as part of its pantheon of deities struggling for relevance in modern times. I will say no more on that, because we are no longer Neil Gaiman fans here on Ladies of Lore. So instead, let's draw attention to a black female playwright and poet, Ntozake Shange, and her work entitled For Coloured Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. And this is a series of what Shange dubbed choreo poems, and they are essentially poetic monologues which were written to be accompanied by movement and music, and they tell the story of 7 different women who have experienced oppression in a racist and sexist society. And I read this week, and it is an incredibly powerful piece of work, and one that I would honestly encourage you all to take a look at. It is extremely eye-opening, and please read it. If you are a video game fan, you might have recognised the term Orisha or Orissa from the game Overwatch. Here, Orissa is one of the playable heroes and is inspired by a blend of African culture, robotics and mythology. Her name and many elements of her design are influenced by the Yoruba people, and her character fits within the Afrofuturism movement, much like Janelle Monáe's work, and merges African traditions with advanced technology, a little bit similar, I guess, to what we see in Wakanda in Black Panther. And although Orissa isn't directly a reference to Oshun, she's a clear fusion of African cultural themes and futuristic robots. And she's also pretty fun to play. I haven't sunk too many hours into Overwatch, but I have played enough to know A, that I am very bad at it, and B, that Orissa is pretty fun to play. Overwatch 2 though, I don't know what happened there. I don't know what happened, guys. Additionally, Oshun is frequently invoked in spiritual communities, from modern-day practitioners of divination to feminist and self-love movements that embrace her energy as a force of empowerment. Across the world, Oshun has continued to evolve, inspiring feminist movements, Afro-spirituality and contemporary artists. In popular culture, she is often referenced as a symbol of divine femininity, empowerment and self-love. Oshun is also still deeply tied to the Osun River in Nigeria, where her devotees still make annual pilgrimages to offer her honey, oranges and other sacred gifts. The Osun Osogbo Sacred Grove, as I said earlier, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, remains one of the most important centres of Yoruba spiritual practices today. Oshun's adaptability across cultures speaks to her enduring influence. She's not just a goddess of the past, but she's a living presence in the heart of those who honour her. Her waters remind us that love, healing and transformation are always within reach if we're only willing to listen to the river's call. Oshun, in all her many names and forms, remains a universal symbol of beauty, love, and the sacred power of water. Whether flowing through rivers in Nigeria, dancing in ceremonies in Cuba and Brazil, or whispering love spells in New Orleans, she continues to shape the spiritual landscapes of the world. Her waters remind us that love, beauty and justice must flow freely, nourishing the world with their presence. And just like a river, Oshun adapts, transforms, and never disappears. Thank you so much for listening today. If you've enjoyed, please do subscribe because there is plenty more where this came from. As I said, I am over on Blue Sky as well, so if you fancy a chat, I'll be over there. And I'm always excited to read your comments and your thoughts, so please do keep them coming. And I'll be back next week to unravel another thread in the rich tapestry of women in mythology and folklore. Until then, take care and go and watch the video for Hold Up.